some that people
at the bottom of the
put
screen, there's a Q&A part. That's where you can type in questions. We have just two really questions
Just a
that were
couple
submitted
questions.
beforehand, and then we'll open it up to you guys. And if there's no questions, we'll close.
Yeah, or you guys can give me a lesson. I'll shank some balls for you and see who can fix me.
All right, I think we got about 30-second count here, and then officially we'll get started here. Hope everybody's getting ready for great holidays. It's another horrible day here in Southern California. It's about 70 degrees. Don't want to rub that in, but
nope, not a cloud in the sky. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so let's say officially we'll start early. All right, so basically, I think what they said is, can a person in S posture that has no ability to posterior tilt, so like they can't do the pelvic tilt test, they can't rock backwards, can that affect their ability to transfer pressure in the downswing for Morton? So I think if you remember from level 1, we talk a lot about that pelvic tilt test. It's kind of like the core, or the ability to posterior tilt is, I want to say it's probably the #1 factor in your ability to transfer energy from your lower body to your upper body.
I think so, yeah.
So you can create pressure. So pressure on the ground, so your ground reaction force, right, is what gets the lower body going.
Mm-hmm.
So what I would say is that, number 1, you can still create power from the ground, but it doesn't transfer effectively to your torso. So it's almost like you can create this and lose it if this is in here. Now, with that said, that's obvious. Okay, in other words, you can still create pressure from the ground and not effectively transfer it to your trunk if you can't use your pelvic tilt.
Yep.
Now, I think the question you're asking is, can you even create pressure from the ground, right? And I always say is, listen, that your orientation of the pelvis does a couple things. Number 1, it makes it difficult to transfer energy to the torso. But number 2, that a lot of people don't understand is that if you take your, I always show people this example, take your shoulder, if you take your shoulder and you rotate your shoulder backwards, externally rotate. Now, if you retract your shoulder blades and do this, you'll have more range of motion. If you protract your shoulder blades, bring your shoulder blades forward, you'll have less range of motion. I think it's obvious that the position of the scapula affects your shoulder range of motion. What's not obvious is the position of the pelvis actually affects your hip range of motion. And actually, the more S posture you have, it actually reduces the range of motion in the hip joint itself. So literally, by being in an S posture and not being able to get out of an S posture, you're telling me you probably have reduced hip range of motion. Now, if you have reduced hip range of motion, it can directly affect your ability to create pressure and ground reaction force. You can't create any of that rotary motion in there. Got it.
So would you find those players too tend to, I mean, sometimes you see these players that rotate left early, like they almost reverse hip?
So when I say it affects your ground reaction force, is number 1 is the line of force. Push. So like basically, it's probably easier for you to push from the balls of your, like the ball of your right foot versus the heel of your right foot. And it's probably so literally you'll see this different or abnormal direction of force, direction of push, like how they transfer is a little off, and the total amount. So in other words, if I can't connect the core and keep everything stabilized, your ability to push into the ground can be affected as well. So I think it's all the above.
Okay.
So it can affect the pattern of the center of pressure, the direction of the center of pressure, and the amount of center pressure if you're in S posture, which is why we really don't want you to be in S posture.
Got it. Okay. So let's look at the other one. I know you posted an article with Patrick Cantlay recently. Yeah. With regards to a recent article on Patrick Cantlay, how can he exhibit slow arm speed yet fast club head speed?
Okay. So this is referring to we talked about one of the best players on tour, Patrick Cantlay, was out for 3 years.
That's right, with the lower
fracture
back
in his lower back. And one of the things he was doing was creating this excessive X factor stretch. And one of the things that Jamie Mulligan, his coach, and him kind of worked really hard was to try and reduce that torque.
Yes.
But the total amount of stretch still remained the same. It was just how he kind of did the stretch that, and I would recommend anybody take a look at that article. It's pretty cool on what they did. And I think that, the reason we suggested modifying this is because you never want to create your power source in one area, right? Yep. You have core power, shoulder power, wrist power. You want all these areas, but if you kind of like, my shoulder and my wrists aren't that great, so I'll just do 3 times as much of my core, it tends to break down.
Yeah.
Like the one guy's doing all the work tends to break down. So what they did a good job is they kind of redistributed, let's say, the power transfer. So they kind of brought everything down to kind of more similar. Now, I guess you're referring to is in the kinematic sequence, right? Whenever you do some of these changes, sometimes you'll see peak speeds can change a little bit. So I think the question is is can you lower your total speed in one of your segments, but still maintain fast clubhead speed or even increase your clubhead speed, right? Now, think about this is, first of all, you got to understand on the peak speed. So how do you get your peak speeds? So peak speed is created by transferring energy from one segment to the next, and each segment creates speed. So let me back up to this. Most people think kinematic is like a whip. Take the handle of the whip and you snap the whip, right? The problem with snapping a towel or snapping a whip is in the whip analogy, only one segment creates speed. It's the handle, right? So the handle creates speed and you transfer energy. In your body, can your arms add speed?
Yep.
Every part of the handle, every part of the whip can create speed in the body, right? Now, so you want to kind of time these when each one's firing at the same time so they can build off each other, right? And if you think about it, is when the next segment fires, what does it do to the previous segment?
Slows it
down. So sometimes what you'll see is that when one segment starts to accelerate faster, it can actually impact the previous segment, and you can see the previous segment actually slow down 50 to 100 degrees per second. Nothing massive, like you won't see any huge changes, but sometimes when the next segment is increasing its acceleration, it's like, imagine if I'm jumping off your shoulders, right? And I'm like, listen, we got to time this better. If I jump better, you have to maintain more force for me not to throw you down on the ground.
That's right.
So a lot of times we'll see your speed go down just a little bit, but I jump higher. And
so
what's the goal here? The goal here is to get the club moving faster.
Exactly. So, you know, if someone fires their trunk, obviously the arm pins back against the body.
So basically,
slows down.
So I guess what I'm saying is when you fire your trunk, you're rotating around your lower body.
Yes.
So it slows down
the lower body.
You fire your arms, it slows down your trunk. You fire the club, it slows down your arms. So if the club's moving faster, potentially you can see some slower arm speeds. Now, the goal would be to maintain the arm speeds. And fire the club head faster, but that's very common to see something like that.
Would you see that more if somebody was to throw the club early?
On a bad player.
On a bad player.
Bad player, you would see that, but now you would see reduced club head speed and arm speed, right?
Speed.
So
got it.
that would be the nightmare. So we're always looking at, look, as long as the ultimate object is moving faster, I think those other speeds will pick up, right? So, and again, sometimes when you change where your power sources are, some of your timing, sequencing changes as well. You got to get used to that. And that's where it's amazing what Patrick's done, you know, to change just a little thing in your swing. It's difficult. And he came back after 3 years and wins.
I know.
I mean, that's incredible.
It's impressive.
Yeah, really, really impressive. Okay, so guys, those were the first two questions we had that were submitted beforehand.
Wrote in.
Now that you guys are on here and listening, on the bottom we have this Q&A part. Literally, this is your chance to ask any questions, anything from golf level 2
level 3s, whatever it is.
Level 1, anything you got, we'd be happy to answer those.
We actually had a great level 3 this past week here.
We just did have a great level 3, and okay, let's go this one. Brent, I'm not a teaching professional, but I'm interested in attending level 3. Would I be out of my element?
No, not at all. I mean, you know, I think the big thing with level 3 is obviously we go through a lot of drills which pertain to really anybody. We do some advanced 3D, Greg, so that might be the only area that might be a little skeptical, but it's even skeptical in a good way, you know, and even some of the attendees who don't use 3D regularly, that's a tougher part. But I think the short game stuff James does is incredible. And obviously my putting stuff's amazing. So I think anybody could attend.
Let me tell you what I tell Brent, my medical fitness providers. Knowledge is power, right? To me, if you're more effective at communicating with your golf coaches, you're better at what you do. It's like, you know, I went and visited Dr. James Andrews on our advisory board, surgery, right? Watched him do meniscus surgery on the knee. I'm not doing meniscus surgery on the knee.
But it made you that much
I think I understand how to rehabilitate a knee a lot better right there just by doing that. So I feel like I would spend as much time as I can watching you guys teach and coach, because I think it just makes you build the athlete better. So in my opinion, knowledge is always important if you can.
Colin
added a little bit so Colin's question was, what are your thoughts on hip angulation pre-transition? He said tilting the lead hip downwards at the start. So I think you're talking about the increase in anterior tilt or S posture, like the towards S posture than back posterior posture.
Or is he talking about the lead hip going down?
All right, Colin, we got another question for you. So just tell us, are you talking more about the increase in anterior tilt, or are you talking about side bend?
So, because I want to make sure that do you mean like going down? My only danger there would be keeping the right hip high, which we don't like. It's going to go down a little bit because you have to shift your weight. But
or do you talk?
Are you talking about side bend?
So you're talking about what you're talking about. Side bend. So
So again, so in side bend, Colin, like obviously, you know, as I rotate back, there's a shift back into the lead side. I think everybody's hip has to go down a little bit. It's when it gets excessive and the right hip comes up, which I would hate. Anytime the right hip hikes high, that tends to throw and it gets them trapped and they can't create space.
Very hard to recover from that, right? So that we call that right hip launch.
Right hip launch, yeah.
So literally when you have lateral weight shift, you should, as you weight shift, the left hip should go high, right? That's part of the coupled motion there. So if the left hip is going down, the right hip staying high, it's more of an upper body fall than there's a lower body translation, right? So that somehow something is missing there a little bit.
I mean, if you explain what the hips actually do on the backswing and downswing on elite level players, I mean, obviously the right hip goes high on the backswing to a certain degree.
Normally on a driver, just so you know, normally on a driver, on the backswing, if I take 125 of our PGA Tour players, take the average, take one standard deviation above, one standard deviation below, which is, you know, that would cover a pretty big group, right? Normally, what you're going to see is you're going to see about 10 degrees high on the right hip on the backswing. You know, you're always, the right hip definitely is going to be higher than the left hip on the backswing, but 10 degrees right hip high for a lot of people feels pretty level. You know, most people, they get, it's like 20, 30, 40 degrees right hip high. So 10 degrees high at the right hip. And then on the downswing, you're going to see that start to drop. It's going to start to come down, like this side tilt. It's going to start to get to neutral. And then it's going to go to 10 degrees left hip high. So I always say there's this 10-10 check that we check in side bend. But we normally see that starting to change immediately in weight shift.
That's right.
If it stays high, that would be out of our, let's call it normal range.
Usually those players get steep or they get trapped, and then they, you know, they have to early release the club. So
now, the only thing I would say is on some of the finesse shots, lower irons, more attack angle down there, you can get away with it, no problem. Okay, Jeff, what drills do you use for a player to increase speed once sequence is good?
Ooh, what drills do you increase? Well, you've got your speed.
We got about 1 million of them.
There's so many of them.
So let's just go through quickly our favorites. So let me tell you a couple things that I think maybe you don't know, and then maybe we talk about some of the obvious ones. Okay, so once you have good sequence and you want to start building speed, to me, we look at our PGA Tour players, LPGA players, and then we look at our long drive tour players, right? So I'm looking at really good players, and then I'm looking at great distance players, right? So not even looking at bad. There's still a big difference between PGA and long drive. We talk about this in our power level 2 class a lot, is that if you look at long drive versus PGA Tour, normally they can increase about 20% more energy from their lower body to their trunk. So they're 20% more effective at transferring energy from here to here. And I would say anywhere between 10 and 30, right? So they're in there. Then if I look at how well they can transfer long drive, how much more energy they can transfer from their arms to the club, again, it's around 20, 25%. So they're almost 25% more effective transferring the club, which sounds pretty cool until you look at how effective they are at transferring energy from the trunk to the arm. Long drive tour tends to be almost 50% more effective, or they add almost 50% more speed from the trunk to the arm than the PGA Tour. So if you want to know a secret to hitting it farther, just for me looking at all that stuff, arm speed is really important. Really, really important. So when your sequence is good, you know, obviously I want to work on every part of the body, getting it faster. But arm speed will be type of a focus. Now, how do we go after arm speed? Now, the good news with arm speed is I like doing this positionally. So in other words, we do a lot of kneeling drills. Like we'll have them go half kneeling,
stabilize,
and throwing, chopping, stuff like this, because it forces you to kind of increase your arm speed. That's why, you know, a lot of players will be like, hey, I saw Jason Zuback hit 300 yards for his knees. Or, well, if you have 50% more arm speed, you can actually generate a lot of speed there. So I like a lot of the kneeling stuff, the weighted ball programs, the weighted clubs and lightweight clubs, the super speed drills from a kneeling position.
How about left-handed?
So we always do something in our practice, we call it the big break theory. You can only accelerate something that you know you can decelerate. So we always do everything both sides, left and right. So I like this series of overweight to underweight, so light to heavy, do it throwing drills. I like, just you can hear me say this, I like non-golf drills as well too. Like I like tennis rackets, baseball bats, throwing weighted balls, sprinting forward, sprinting backwards. It just makes the nervous system go faster, and then their kinematic sequence just goes faster, right? And then you can add in some of the super speed stuff to kind of put it into the golf swing, right? That's kind of some of my favorites. So some of the kneeling stuff, throwing, backward sprinting, over and under load, left versus right.
I always look at legs. It seems to me that every player that comes in that we test that has speed has great leg strength, right? So that push, how they load against the ground, and specifically how the pelvis moves back underneath them. You know, to me, guys that early extend or jump towards the golf ball, they're robbing themselves of speed. So if the kinematic sequence is good, I'm looking for drills to make them go back, 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 back.
Yep.
Because that increases the arm speed.
If you want to increase your acceleration going forward, you should counterbalance
push them backwards.
Yep. That's a quick highlight of some of our favorite ones. Yep. All right.
Billy Horschel was out here last week. Posted something about stuff that he done with his team out here. Can you guys just talk generally about what happens in those team meetings out here and how it might be applicable?
I'll repeat that question.
That's right. We have a voice from the distance yelling at us. So we have a question coming in from our crew on the side here, and that is we had Billy Horschel in with his team, with his fitness trainer, and then Todd Anderson, his swing coach. And they were coming really in their off-season training to look at some of the things, and Billy posted something on what he found. And we went through and did his physical screen, found a few things there that weren't moving pretty much. So he was actually getting a lot out of what he had, right?
Yeah, well, I think that's more of like how do we attack a player when they come in? And when Todd Anderson's coach and Alex's trainer came in with Billy, I think let's just go through what we do with all players, right?
Sure.
So the first thing that we do with any player, and it doesn't even matter why they're here, is first thing is we sit down is we ask them, how can we help, right? Because don't assume you know why they're here, right? So the first thing we say is, how can we help? Now, when they say, oh, I'm here just because we want to check all the dots and make sure we're not missing anything, which is what Billy was saying. He's like, I just want off season. I want to make sure we're doing all the right stuff. I think the coaches have different questions. I think the trainers have different questions. I think the medical team might have different questions. So we go through and we ask the same question to the whole team. Hey, Todd, is there anything that your questions you have? And Alex, is there anything in the gym you need? And then same thing with Billy. We go through the whole team and ask those questions. Now, once we get what they want, right? So we kind of know why they're here. Now it still doesn't matter. We're going to go collect data the same way, right? Because literally to answer any question, I think we need at least 3 pieces of information.
Okay.
Right? I think we need physical screen. You got to know what you can physically do.
Yep.
Now, just because, let's say in the gym, you can move your arm this far, doesn't mean when you're swinging, your arm's not going to move farther. So then we need to get your biomechanical data. So we'll go hook you up and get our 3D motion capture, right? That tells me how efficient what you're doing and dynamically what you can do in your golf swing. And then I think we need some 2D video, right? And then depending on the player, right, sometimes we'll do some short game skill evaluation. Like on Billy, we looked at all clubs, right, from wedges all the way through driver. And then maybe there's some sports psychology practice protocols that we might go through and look and see how are you practicing, mental management type of stuff. Once we have all that information, then we sit down, we go back to our initial question, how can we help you? And I think we have all the data that we need to be able to answer that question. And it's surprising on most players on how many of them need to work on all aspects. In other words, it's not like, oh, we discovered it was just a swing problem, or we discovered it was just a mobility problem. Almost every player has all the above. Right. There's pieces they need to work on their swing, pieces they need to work on their body. I think the cool part about this is when they realize that it's a multifactorial influence on their swing, and they now put the pieces together and they go, okay, so now we know the problem. Okay, my hip doesn't rotate properly here, therefore I'm not loading my hip properly in my golf swing. It's causing me to change my equipment in this. Oh, I forgot equipment. We got to value equipment. Changing my equipment fitting based on this thing. And I've always had a struggle with this one type of shot. It all kind of makes sense. And they're like, I got it. And when everything makes sense, that's when the world starts to change. Right? Because now everybody's working on the same thing. Player gets confidence, and they just get. And
I think you're seeing this trend, Greg, across the board in that, when we look at players coming out today, we've got obviously Cameron Champ, that's 190-mile-an-hour ball speed. And we had a player just out here this morning that's cruising at 192. There's another young player we work with that's in the high 180s. And, it's because when I look at them, they've assembled a team at a young age. That team is working towards a common goal. And now they've got their fitness, their medical, their body being taken care of, and then they've got their swing coinciding. So it's no longer, hey, the golf instructor's doing this, but the fitness guy's working on this, and it doesn't match. It's now really teams are working well together, right?
Let's go make this little golfer.
Yeah.
And then if they're pretty good, we'll go try and turn them into an athlete.
There you
And now
go.
we realize that's the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because when they get older, it's hard to turn them into an athlete.
Yeah.
So when they're young, it's better to turn them into athletes. So now that what's better is like, I got this great little athlete and I like to turn them into a golfer.
Yeah, and you know, everybody wants to always blame equipment, and equipment's on the limit. You know, USGA has set limits as to what you can do. So what you're really seeing now is you're seeing the athlete, the fitness, the combination of the team coming together with good equipment fitting, and that's really what's making the change. And I think that's why we're seeing such a big increase in the speed these guys are getting.
It is pretty incredible. I think we were looking at the last year, at the end of the year, the 2017-2018 season. I think we looked at the top 5 in driving distance on the PGA Tour, and you can go look at this on PGAtour.com. Top 5 in driving distance on the PGA Tour, top 5 in driving distance on the web.com tour. Take the average of the top 5 driving distance. The web.com, I think, is up by 22 miles an hour.
That's unbelievable.
22 miles an hour.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's what's coming.
That's what's coming. And you know, when you take that, like some people ask me all the time, well, hey, I'm dealing with my local club member. How do I take that back to my club? Well, I'm even seeing clubs now having a fitness director. It used to be that they might have a fitness center, but they don't talk to the golf pros, or the golf pros don't talk to the fitness guys. Now there's clubs that are actually combining programs, lesson programs with fitness. So that's where the club member is really going to benefit. And they don't need to do as much as the elite level tour player to get better, right?
Okay. Again, if there's any questions from any of you guys or gals, anything we can help you with while we're on, please do it now. We'll give you guys kind of the 15, 20-second clock. If we don't get any questions, then everybody's going to hopefully have a Merry Christmas,
Merry
Happy
Christmas,
New Year,
Happy
Happy Holidays, and hopefully we'll see you guys somewhere in 2019.
Yep.
On a golf course somewhere.
Keep watching for seminars on the schedule for more of these.
We're going to put some more Q&A dates up here, hopefully before the end of the year too, so you can see next year's schedule. So it looks like everybody happy. All right, buddy.
All right.
Happy holidays.
Have a good one.
See you guys. Thanks for chiming in.
Bye.